by way of introduction to Masechet Bava Kama, which deals primarily with torts, with damages, we should look at the Chumash and the Torah Shebechtav and note that the Torah dedicates quite a few psukim to the topic of Nezikin and describes the responsibility that one has for damage that one causes by themselves or through their property. And there's a number of different elements of the damage. We see the concept of bor, ki yivtach ish bor, or yuchre ish bor, velo yichasenu. If someone creates a pit in the public domain and somebody falls in or something falls in, bala bor yishalem kesef. The person who created that bor pays damages. If a person's ox causes damage, he pays for that damage. And the Torah also describes ki yaver ish sadeh okerem v'shilachet bi'iro u'biyer b'sadeh acher. If a person starts a fire that consumes another person's property, he pays damages. And etc. And it's important to notice that the Torah spends a lot of time speaking about the responsibility to pay for damages, but never discusses the prohibition to cause this damage. When it comes to the different categories of damage, we see that there are what's known as the 4 avot Nezikin, that when the Mishnah in Bava Kama Daf Bet Amud Aleph discusses damage at first, it defines damages as 4 categories of damage: shor, bor, damage done by a person's ox or a pit or maveh, and hever. And each one is a different and unique category of damage with multiple subcategories. It's also very important to be familiar with the concept of shor tam and shor muad. Shor tam is a ox that does not have any known tendency to cause damage, and a shor muad is kol shehi'idu bo shlosha yamim. That a shor muad is an ox that damaged or gored multiple times, and it was testified about this in Beit Din, so that the owner certainly knows about this tendency. And the word muad comes from the word heidu, testified about this animal. And because the owner is more responsible for the damages of a shor muad, he pays full damage, unlike a tam, where it's only half damages. And the other point of introduction comes from the beginning of the 8th parak of Bava Kama, where we see that chovel b'chavero, when a person causes personal damage to another person, he's chayav for 5 elements, and that is nezek, tsa'ar. Nezek is the actual loss that was caused. The tsa'ar is the pain. The ripoy is the medical expenses. Shevet is the loss of work, and boshet is the embarrassment or shame that was caused. And if a person damages with his body to another person, he pays all 5 elements of damage. And we'd like to look at the Issur Nezikin, that is there in Issur, is it prohibited to cause damage, or is it only a cause for responsibility? And there is only some small points of evidence that Nezikin is a prohibition. And one is a Mishnah Masechet Kiddushin, which says, Tanan in a Mishnah, Hasholech at be'ira bi'archeve shotav katan patur midinei adam v'chayav midinei shamayim. That if a person sends a fire in the hand of someone who doesn't have full capacity, and that person, at the instructions of the sender, causes damage, no one is responsible in Dinei Adam in court. But the person who sent the fire is Chayab b'Dinei Shamayim, because we know that he is ultimately the cause for this damage. Shilach biyad pikeach chayav. If a person sends a fire through an agent who has full capacity, who's an adult with full intelligence, so the person who sets the fire is responsible, but the person who sent him is not responsible. And the Gemara asks, V'amai, why is this the case? Nemo, why don't we follow the principle of Shlucho Shel Adam Kimoto? That if a person sends an agent, he is his representative, and therefore the agent is only acting on behalf of the person who sent him or hired him. Why isn't the boss responsible? And the Gemara answers, Shani hatam de'in shliach l'dvar avera, that we have a principle when it comes to averot, that there's no such thing as agency. If you send an agent to do any sin, there's no concept of agency, and the agent acts on his own and is not considered to be the legal representative of the person who sent him. And the logic the Gemara gives, because we say divrei harav, divrei hatalmid, divrei mishom in. If you have instructions of the master and instructions of his student, to whom should you listen? So the agent who was hired or sent to cause damage should have known not to listen to the person who hired him, but rather to listen to God. And if he doesn't, he's acting on his own, and therefore the agent is responsible and not the sender. And that's the case with every sin. If a person hires someone to violate Shabbat, to steal, to eat non-kosher, in all these cases, the agent has free will and is considered to be acting on his own and not on behalf of the sender. And the important thing to notice here is that what is the sin that we're discussing here? The Gemara seems to clearly believe that sending a fire to burn someone's property is a sin. And this proves that not only is damage a cause for responsibility to pay, but is also a sin, a violation of the morals and ethics of God. And we have to ask ourselves, where does the Torah teach us such a concept that this is a sin? And there are a few possible sources. One, for example, Lifnei iver lo titei michshol. We know that you can't make a stumbling block before somebody else. And the Meshech Chochmah says, Mizeh azhara lepoteach al korah bor b'shut harabim. If you can't make a stumbling block, you certainly can't make a pit in the street, because that's a stumbling block for someone to fall into. So the Meshech Chochmah says that there's a source for a sin, for damage through bor, through a pit. However, this is limited to this particular type of damage, but wouldn't include a person who lets his animal go wild and damage, or sets a fire. So Lifnei iver lo titei michshol is a reasonable source, but is limited to one circumstance of Nezikin. The Rabbeinu Yonah in Pirkei Avot says something interesting, which is that, as an aside, he mentions in Pirkei Avot, he says that Lo Tigzol includes Kol Nezikin Bechlal Oto Halav, that all types of damage is included in Lo Tigzol, in the prohibition against stealing. It's unclear why that's the case, because stealing is a little bit different than damage. Stealing is when a person takes another person's property into his own possession, and Nezikin is just damage. The Kehilat Yaakov, the Stipler Gaon, has a different suggestion, and that is that he thinks it's included in Hashavat Avedah. But he explains why that is the case. And that is because we have a mitzvah of of returning a lost object. And he cites the Gemara, which says that looks at the pasuk, which teaches us the mitzvah of Hashavat Avedah, which says that if you see your friend's shore or animal lost, you should return it to him. V'chein ta'aseh l'chamoro, v'chein ta'aseh l'simlato, and you should do the same thing not only for his animal, but for his not only for his ox, but for his donkey and his clothing. U'lechol avedat achicha, anything that your friend loses. And the Gemara says that this extra language, lechol avedat achicha, teaches us something, which is ra mayim sheshotfinu ba'in. If you see a person's property which is about to be flooded and you have the opportunity to protect it, you are responsible to do that. What is the source? Amar Rava lechol avedat achicha, that it says all lost objects, l'rabot, which comes to include even avedat karka, the loss of land. You even have to return someone's land to him. How do you lose your land? So the Gemara says that if someone's land is about to be flooded and become a riverbed, you are responsible to save it because of Hashavat Avedah, which teaches us that Hashavat Avedah is not only returning something which is lost, but protecting someone else's property from loss. And the Kilad Yaakov says that if you're responsible to protect your friend's property from loss, Kol shekain, how much more so shechayav shelo yazik biadayim, that if you have to protect it from being lost, certainly you can't cause it to be lost by damaging it. And therefore, Hashavat Avedah includes or presupposes the fact that it's prohibited to cause damage directly to another person's property. What's the nafkamina? Whether it is a sin or a responsibility to return. So one nafkamina might be about the case of Safek, because we have a principle when it comes to all Torah laws, Safek dioraita l'chumra. If you're in doubt as to whether something is prohibited dioraita or not, we have to be strict. Safek dirabanan l'kula, Safek dioraita l'chumra. But there's another principle when it comes to monetary law. Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, that if a person wants to claim money from somebody else, he has to bring the evidence. And what would be in a case when you're not sure if you damaged somebody? Would you apply the principle of safek dioraita l'chumra, and you better pay to make sure you avoid the sin of Nezikin? Or do we say, well, you want to sue me to pay you damages, you bring the evidence? And it's possible that we need to define the nature of Nezikin, whether it's fundamentally a prohibition or fundamentally monetary law, and we should apply the rule of Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya, or is it fundamentally an avera, in which case we should focus on safek dioraita l'chumra.